During the build-up to the 2019 general election in the United Kingdom, a man went on Question Time and said this.
I'd like to call out Labour as liars. I am one of them people that he will tax more, and I am nowhere near in the top 5%. So I'm calling you a liar right now. That 5% is a lie, right? I am nowhere near that. And you are going to income tax me as an employee. You're not going after the billionaires, you're going after the employees, where it's easy money because it's PAYE. I have no choice.
That's just not... I'm afraid on that you're mistaken. We're not going to raise income tax for anybody apart from the top 5% of earners.
I am not in the top 5% of earners.
So we're not going to increase your income tax?
But you are, because I've read your policy. It's above £80,000. And I am nowhere near in the top 5%, let me tell you. I'm not even in the top 50%.
And that's why we're not going to increase your income tax. And
So hang on, let's just be clear. So you're suggesting you would raise income tax on those earning over £80,000. You're saying that would affect you because you earn over that sum?
Yes.
So you earn over £80,000?
Yes, and I'm not in the top 5%.
I think that is the top 5%, isn't it?
I'm not.
For those of you who don't know, Question Time is a question and answers programme on the BBC that has been going for many years. And basically they have a panel of, say, 5 or 6 guests, and they'll tend to be made up of like 4 politicians, maybe a journalist or 2, and then a bit of a wild card guest who might be, you know, an author or a musician or a movie director or an entrepreneur or something along those lines, someone who's a bit more of a fringe character, and they'll discuss sort of current affairs and politics and those types of things. Strange as it may seem, when I was younger I used to watch it quite regularly. It's on weekly and it's about an hour long, but I do think it has deteriorated progressively for maybe 7 or so years, and I don't tend to watch it now, particularly deteriorating once David Dimbleby had retired and was replaced by Fiona Bruce, who's the current host. But that's just my opinion. The point being, basically the format of the programme is that you have these panellists, these guests, and then the show moves around from different towns and cities around the UK, and audience members are invited to sort of put their hands up and ask questions to the guests and panellists. Sometimes these questions can be a bit grim, might be the word, especially recently there have been sort of quite aggressively anti, say, LGBT or just sort of quite openly racist people in recent times. There was a woman on there who over a year ago was saying that we needed to fully shut all of the borders and just not let anyone else in because the country was full, as she put it, and she said that there was no longer any education. Shutting the borders looks quite prescient now, but I don't think she was predicting a global pandemic. I think she was just a racist. But yeah, you get the idea of the programme, and you may be wondering, why on earth have you just spent this amount of time talking about Question Time when I clicked on a video about wealth versus income, unless that's if you're still watching, which many people probably won't be, seeing as the length of time this tangent has gone on for. But it's because a lot of people watched that question that man had. Basically, he thought that he wasn't in the top 5% of income earners. And then you might have noticed at the end, he also thought he wasn't in the top 50%. He actually thought he was in the bottom half, despite earning a salary of £80,000 or above. He didn't specify his exact salary, but said it was over £80,000. And at the time, a lot of people wrote this man off as just being a complete idiot. I mean, that was my initial impression. And in many respects, he is an idiot. But I think there's a little bit more to it, a little bit more to unpack there. And personally, I found him quite a fascinating character once you start thinking about the way in which his brain obviously worked, the way in which he's been able to create his own reality where he is in the bottom half of earners. And I find that quite interesting, and I think it's quite telling in this discussion today, which is about the difference between wealth and income that are quite commonly misunderstood or conflated when obviously there is some overlap, but they are two very distinct things. So, to be clear, that man is in the top 5% of earners, or at least was at that time, and is very much in the top 50%. So just to be clear, to be among the top 5% of income tax payers, you need a salary of over £76,800 a year in the United Kingdom. So his salary of over £80,000 probably actually puts him closer to the top 3%, and perhaps even higher if he earns well in excess of that amount. To be in the top 1%, out of interest, in the UK that would be £175,000 a year. And to be in the top 50%, which is what he didn't think he even belonged to the top 50%. To belong to the top 50% in the United Kingdom, you need a salary of £24,400, which is obviously significantly less than £80,000. And it's also worth pointing out that all those figures that I've just thrown at you, they only count people who pay income tax. Now, 43% of adults in the United Kingdom don't pay any income tax at all. So that is basically, he is in the top probably 4% of people who pay income tax. So people in full-time employment, pretty much. So basically, anyone who earned under £12,500 wouldn't even be taken into account in terms of those statistics. However, as absurd as it may seem to lower wage workers or just average wage workers, this man obviously doesn't see himself as being rich or as belonging to any kind of small elite. To him, the idea of him being in the top 5% is just absolutely preposterous. And there are a number of reasons why this may be the case, and it's those reasons that I'm keen to unpick in this video in terms of the relationship between wealth and income. So to do so, I'm going to try and use some graphics or some illustrations, which I haven't done before, and this will no doubt go absolutely terribly, but we'll give it a go nonetheless. And try and pay attention to the content if the words, if the graphics and illustrations aren't particularly good or engaging. Take this example. Bob earns £80,000 a year, but he works in a technical or skilled job where he is among the lowest earners. Most of his colleagues earn £100,000 plus, his boss pays himself in dividends, and upgrades his Range Rover every 12 months, and there are people half Bob's age at the company who are earning more than him. His best friend from school is an electrician, but he set up his own firm, did well, and now employs a team of 7 electricians who work under him. He earns £160,000 a year, around twice Bob's salary. And everyone within their relatively small friendship group seems to be pretty well off. Bob looks around at his workmates, his best mate earning twice his salary in a blue-collar industry, and the rest of his mates doing fairly well, and he feels as though he is lagging behind. He may be in the top 5% of earners, but he only sees other members of that 5%, and he is in the bottom 50% of his reference point. Not just that, Bob has been earning £80,000 a year since 2010, and whilst those around him have enjoyed pay rises, his wages have remained stagnant whilst house prices and the cost of living has risen. Not only does Bob not feel wealthy compared to his peers, he feels poorer than his former self. The idea that he's now among some privileged elite seems absurd to him. There's also the small matter of how Bob arranges his finances. Bob is the sole breadwinner in his household, with 3 kids, each estimated to cost him over £150,000 between birth and the age of 18. This is likely to be even higher for Bob since his friends are all sending their kids to music lessons or sports training, but that UK average of £150,000 will work for the point at hand. Bob's mortgage payments are £1,000 a month. He pays £800 to lease his car, and the same again on bills and groceries. He goes on 2 holidays a year with his family. One costs £5,000 for the family to go long haul in the winter, the other costs half that amount to go to Spain, Portugal or France in the summer holidays. That accounts for almost 3/4 of Bob's after-tax income, without child costs are even taken into account. And Bob was never taught about saving or investing, so he is leveraged up to his eyeballs, and after expenses, he's left with little. Again, he doesn't feel wealthy. Now, let's compare Bob to Mike. Mike earns £40,000 a year, half Bob's salary. It puts him still in the top 25% of earners, but not nearly in the top 5% of earners in the UK, like Bob. However, Mike's wife also works, she earns £30,000 a year, and when Mike was only 21, his grandparents left him part ownership in their home, split between the other grandkids, which when they sold, netted him £80,000. Mike lived with his parents until he was 24, paying no rent or expenses, saving another £50,000. When Mike and his wife bought a house, he had £130,000 in savings. She had £50,000 saved up all of her own, so they bought a house without a mortgage and they were able to buy a car outright. Mike and his wife have therefore been able to save and invest with vastly smaller expenses than Bob and his wife, despite Bob earning 2 times Mike's salary. You can quickly start to see how there is a big difference between wealth and income. Bob has a high salary, but he's hardly growing his wealth at all, meanwhile Mike's salary is more modest, but he feels much better off. What's more, the biggest point in all of this is Giles, who earns millions in dividends and capital gains, and spends his time split between Monaco, Mykonos, and Miami on his yacht. That Question Time guest went on to say that the top 5% don't even pay income tax. And to him, these are the rich people, and in some respects he's right. The mega rich don't tend to show up in the income tax statistics. No one in the Forbes 100 rankings amass their fortunes on a yearly, monthly, weekly or hourly salary. However, to think the super rich account for 5% of the population is a wild miscalculation. What Bob thinks of as the top 5% is really more like the top 0.1% or even the top 0.01%. Bob is right to think that these people are able to pay less tax than him as a proportion of their income. He is just ignorant to the size of this group and how many people earn far, far less than him. Of course, it is possible that he really is just an absolute mega idiot who actually earns way over £80,000 a year, has all his finances in order, knows loads of people who are much worse off than him, and he is just totally ignorant and living in his own world. And to some degree, regardless of circumstances, he is extremely ignorant and extremely shielded from the wider public to think that, I mean, the 5% thing I think is forgivable. To think he's not in the top 50% on £80,000 a year, that does beg a belief. But anyway, regardless of circumstances, I think he's an interesting character in terms of using that lens to look through this discussion. And when you put it how I did in those examples, hopefully you can start to see how even someone on half someone else's salary, whether it's 80 to 40 or whatever the mathematics might be, can actually feel much more comfortable and much more well off depending on their circumstances and how their money's arranged. So, though crucially, I think the most important thing to point out is that someone on £80,000 or £40,000 a year is still doing extremely well in regards to the actual majority of people. As I said earlier, 43% of adults in the United Kingdom don't pay any income tax whatsoever. Now, obviously, this does include students and retirees, but it also includes a huge number of people who are either in precarious part-time employment or are just unemployed. And even those in work, we now have a situation where there are more people who are in work poverty than who are in poverty and don't have a job of any kind. So those are the people who, when you look at it like that, the idea of this man thinking that he's not in the top 50% or even 5% does seem slightly absurd. But I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope it laid out some of those differences, and if you are a UK viewer, maybe brought back some nostalgia of that particular guest, who I will say is far from the worst audience member that they've had on Question Time, either before or since. But yeah, thank you all for watching. Please do hit that like button if you enjoyed today's video. It makes a huge difference in terms of the YouTube algorithms, and it's really easy to do. You just go straight down and hit the thumb that's like that. Leave a comment if you have any questions or anything that you want to discuss about the video. If there's anything you feel I missed, as always, I'll try to either get back to you or cover it in a future video. And please do hit subscribe and turn on notifications for the Reluctant Investor. Cheers.